I'm going to start my main recording here then, and my voice recording. And I guess then that now we are finally set to go. It was quite hard getting the setup working properly here, but welcome to everyone. So this is going to be the first episode of my new podcast, my medical education podcast, and I have Paula Bastos from Paulinha Estuda here for our first episode. So welcome, Paula, and thank you for coming. Thank you for accepting my invitation.
Thank you for inviting me. And hello, everybody. I'm Paula Bastos, and I'm a senior medical student from Brazil. And I had studied for 2 years in Russia. So I hope it helps you that also want to go to medical school.
Which semester are you at currently? I think you are on the eighth. Is that it? Oh,
Yeah, and actually now I'm going to the uh, 11th semester.
okay. So I'm late here. You are almost finishing it.
Yeah, I'm going to my 6th year.
And so Paula actually asked me if we could do a live some days in the past. And when we were talking, I found out she actually went to Russia. And I'm going to address the elephant in the room now, but just a second for that. And so I thought that was quite an interesting experience and that we could perhaps start this conversation from that. And so, as I said, elephant in the room, I'd like first to make it absolutely clear that Paula came back from Russia to Brazil before the war or before anything like that happened. And after all, we'll be talking about the university and the people who are in no way responsible for any upper level decisions. I very much doubt people in Kursk Medical Institute or school, I'm not sure what exactly is the name, had anything to do with the decisions that were taken by political leaders. So this has nothing to do with the very unfortunate recent events. But since I've already started, what's the actual name of the school? Is it Kursk Medical?
Yeah. In 2015, I went to Kursk State Medical University. It's located in Kursk. It is 8 hours from Moscow. Yeah, at south. South.
It must be somewhat close to Kazakhstan then, perhaps.
Yeah, uh, it's kind of very far actually from my city because I'm from Rio de Janeiro. I'm from Itaperuna. It's a city in the interior of Rio de Janeiro, and I remember that when I came to Russia, that it took 2 days, 2 days to arrive in Kursk. And there I started to do medical education in English.
Yes,
So there is two languages, English and Russian.
that's a really interesting point you brought up. I talked to you before. I have many followers from Eastern Europe, and I see that many of the people that go to study in Russia, in Ukraine, in Georgia, are actually, for example, from Asia, from India, from Pakistan, from the Middle East. I see that very often. And one of the things that draws our attention is the fact that many of these universities teach medicine also in English. So how does it work? Did you apply for English? Is it like that? Are there different processes? Do you choose if you want to study either Russian or English?
So in this case, in my city, or I think here in Brazil, there is an agency in São Paulo. So these agents, they do this selective process, and then you do, like, I send some documents, I send my notes, I send curriculum, I send everything. It's a selective process. So they took around 30 Brazilians to Russia to study medicine there. And when you apply, you can choose if you want to study in English or in Russian. But almost all Brazilians choose English, of course.
Did you speak any Russian when you went there?
So we have there in Cusco State Medical University, we have Russian classes, and then I learned some Russian, but the Russian is so more difficult, so much difficult than other languages because of the Cyrillic alphabet. So they have too much letters and verbal phrases, and you have to conjugate numbers, names. It's not like Portuguese, Brazilian Portuguese, that we just conjugate verbs, but there you need to conjugate everything, all the sentence.
That might be an interesting talk all on its own. It's been some time I've been trying to learn Arab, for example, for whichever purposes. But there are these interesting things we learn with different languages. And for example, in Arab, you is a different word if you are referring to a man or a woman. So if I say to you, your you is going to be different from the you to a man. So I'm aware these things exist, but pretty much you went to Russia without speaking a single word in Russian, so to speak, somewhat, when you went there.
Yeah, actually, the first thing I learned in Russia when I just arrived was Мне не говорят по-русски. Мне не говори по-русски. It means I can't speak Russian. So everybody, because of my color hair and the color of my skin, so it was common to many Russians to come to me and ask something, or like what time it is, or something like that. And I just said, menina говорю по-русски. Я Brazili. So they said, ah, Brazili, da. Yeah, da, Brazili. So they said, извини, sorry, I'm sorry. It was common. But I learned some things, like how to go to the market, and actually the students there who could speak Russian, they deal better with the professors, because it was common to the Russian is speaking English. It's a different accent, and it was common to the professors to sometimes speak Russian in the middle of the sentences. So if you could speak Russian, you would be a better student. You would deal better with them also.
So, how did you come up with this idea to go to Russia? I mean, I've heard of people that go to Russia to study medicine, but I've never seen like an advertisement for it.
Yeah, it was peculiar, because I had this dream to become a doctor since I am 5 years old. So one day I saw in the internet a friend from my city that was studying there. So I saw that and I just said, oh my God, this is my chance. Then I started to search about this in the internet, and I found an agency in São Paulo that was doing the selective process. So I immediately tried to participate from it. And then on my 11th March, yeah, if I'm correct, on my birthday actually, I just received the email saying that I was approved and that I was selective to go to Russia and study there. So I went because I saw it in the internet.
You didn't take any test, it was CV only, the application process.
So when you go there, when you arrive there, you have to do a writing test about biology and, if I'm correct, biology, biochemistry, something like that. And when you arrive there, you do not start immediately the med school. You have to do this test, and if you don't pass, you have to do a preparation. I don't know. I think it's a semester preparation, and then you redo the test, and if you pass, you can start the medical school.
But there's no way for you to fail so bad that they send you back. This isn't an option. You have your subscription.
Yeah, they don't have this. I think they don't do this, but you have to redo it until you pass. It's common there. Like here in Brazil, the tests we don't pass, we are reproved. But there you have to do it again and again and again until you pass. I did the same test 15 times once until I passed.
But that was already in university, not in the preliminary course.
Yeah, already university. So when you are here in Brazil, you send the CV, you send your notes from grad school, you send, I don't remember exactly because it was in 2015, but there was some documents you have to send, and also they do an interview with you. And I remember that I was 18 years old, so they had to do an interview with my parents also via Skype.
That's quite an interesting point. You mentioned you were 18 years old. And here in Brazil, I'm also Brazilian. I did my medical university in Rio de Janeiro, as is actually Paula doing, though not in the same city but the same state. But here in Brazil, you usually start med school between 18, 17 to 19 years old. It's, I believe, the most common. We go straight from our preliminary school right into med school. We have no system akin to the United States, for example, where they have med school as a graduate school and you go to another undergraduate course. Is it the same in Russia? Do they also go to university around 18 years old, and does it also last like 6 years? Is it the same?
Yeah, I think it's the same. The difference is that they, how can I say that? But they get married earlier, so it was common to have Russian classmates that was younger like me, but also pregnant or already married, because they have this valorization of the family. It's common from them. They get married earlier. So yeah, they started the university around 18, 19. Yeah, because also the education there is like kind of free. It's not like here in Brazil.
Well, personally, I went to tax-paid university as well. Technically, to me, it was free, but you are telling me that basically in Russia there are no private for-profit universities. All universities are state non-profit institutions. Is that it?
Yeah, this university I went, it was state toll, so it was kind of from the government, right? And then we are not Russian, so the not Russian students
The foreigners.
they pay.
And if I may ask, overall, considering, for example, ignoring grants and affirmative action and anything that could be used to deduce some value, and also ignoring the fact that they don't pay, for example, thinking about a foreigner, thinking about a Brazilian or an Indian, a Middle Eastern, any person from any of or any other country that not Russia. Is it cheaper, for example, to go to med school in Russia or in Brazil? What's like the ballpark of the numbers? Is it very, very different? Is it somewhat akin?
Yeah, when I went in 2015, there was a huge difference about the price. I remember that here in Brazil, my city, it's around 10,000 Brazilian real per month, but there it was around 2,000, 2,000. Uh, already with the residency, like the fees that you pay to live there. So I went and I lived in the university. They had that rooms for students that can live there. It's kind of a hostel. So I lived in the hostel and it was already included in the fees. So my parents paid around 2,000 per month instead of 10,000 here in Brazil.
So like $2,000 in Brazil versus like $400 in Russia. Just converting it.
No, 2,000 Brazilian real.
Yes, and that's it, $400. At least according to our current currency
Yeah.
exchange.
Uh-huh.
And
Yes. The payment there was for a semester. We don't pay per month like here in Brazil. So my parents they worked and they were uh, gaining the money, and then in the final of the semester they did pay. So it was so much cheaper.
I had no idea about this offered habitation, about these dormitories or hostels you mentioned. Do most students actually use it? Do Russian people live in in these buildings?
Yeah, but the Russian hostel is separated from the our hostel. The Russians they have some privileges naturally. So their hostel is kind of closer to the university. It's separated for exclusively them because Russians study only in Russian. So we don't have that contact.
If you wanted to study in Russian, suppose you spoke Russian, you could have stayed at their dormitory and went to the same buildings and everything. in the same way. Is it so?
Uh, no.
Perhaps.
So actually, we there in hostel they separate Brazilians with Brazilians and Thailands with Thailands and Nigerians with Nigerians and Indians with Indians. So you have the building is separated, like 40th floor Indians, 30th floor Brazilians. But the Russians they stayed in another building, the best building.
And were there many Brazilians there?
Yeah, a lot. Yeah, a lot. And also a lot from my city, actually. Also, a lot Brazilians. Um, and you have to divide a room, to share a room with someone. You don't have a room only for you. So the room is was shared with one more student or maybe two, depends on the size of the room. So I share my room together with another Brazilian.
Yes, I believe it must have been quite a significant cultural experience to go from Brazil to Russia. So, how was it from your personal life, for example, BART academic endeavors? Uh, what was like the hardest part? What went well? How did it work out from a personal, non-academic view?
Yeah, like I said, it was quite an experience. I don't know exactly how to say that it was better or it was worse here from Brazil. It was just different. It's a lot of differences. For example, we had tests every day. It was a PBL kind of education. So we had tests every day. So every day I had to arrive on my room and study for the test of the next day. And professors, they were uh, a lot. They 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 ask a lot from you, especially we Brazilians, because we have a different kind of education. So many Brazilians that arrive there, we are characterized by lazy. Yeah, yeah. So the professors, it's common for them to say, "Ah, lazy Brazilians, lazy Brazilians. When will you start to study or something like that?" Because the Russians, they were perfect because they they learned that way since they were a child. So we have to switch from different kind of educations, but at the same time it's very nice when you can do the adaptation. After your adaptation, you 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 grow a lot because you have to deal with so many difficulties and you learn from that. So I remember I was very happy when I started to really win, to really pass my difficulties. So the professors started to say that I was going well, that I was getting better. So I started to get the maximum grades. So it, we can do this. It's just a matter of adaptation.
What would you say is the greatest difference in education between Brazil and Russia? Because here in Brazil itself, we have many differences between education systems. For example, I believe in most universities we still have the very traditional way of the professor stands there in the front and teaches things, and pretty much the students hear it and learn, at least in theoretical matters. Of course, when you're talking about examining a patient, you're not going to do it this way. But there are many universities that use a different system that's more based, for example, on the student goals and studies a subject and then presents it, for example. So here, even here in Brazil, and I believe this is true of many countries, especially in upper education, higher education, we have significant differences. Are you able to point the major differences between Brazilian and Russian education? Can you give clear examples of how it leaves you less prepared for a different system, for example?
Yes, I can try. Um, here in Brazil, we have our classes around 50 or 60 students, something like that. And the professor is teaching us with a computer or a slide or a PowerPoint presentation, and then in the most of times we can just raise our hands and say, "Oh, professor, I didn't understand very well. Can you repeat it again?" Or we can just do a commentary around that. But there in Russia, it is not possible. We have lectures. Lectures are when there is all the students from that semester, around 30 groups of around 10 students, something like that. So that room is kind of full of students, and there is one teacher with a microphone, and then they do the explanation. So it's a lecture. You have to listen that and do your notes, but you cannot raise your hand and do a question, something like that. You have to wait until you have the practice class about that topic. So in the practice class about that topic, you arrive before the teacher, always, and then they come. We just get up, and then she or he will look at your lab coats and your nails and see if you are if everything's correct there. And then he or she say, "Sit down." We sit down, and then he or she has a list of our names, and then they say, "Oh, De Castro Bastos Paula." So it's me. So I get up, and then he or she will ask me a question about that topic of the day. So I have to answer, or sometimes he or she will just ask me, "Come here in the blackboard and just draw a scheme about aortic valve," or something like that. And then I had to do it, and if I can't, so I get 0. The notes are about 0 to 5. 5 it's the best, and 0 it's the worst. So if you get too much zeros, you cannot do the major at the end of the semester. So it's that is the biggest difference about here in Brazil, because there in Russia you are evaluated each class they evaluate you. It's not only in the major. Like here in Brazil we have classes every day, but we are not evaluated with notes or oral tests or something like that. But there in Russia, you are evaluated every day, and if you are not good enough, you cannot do your major. If you don't do your major, you will not pass the semester. And also in Russia, and I think also in the United States, I don't know, but in Russia you have the tests, the exams. The exams are in the final of that subject. For example, anatomy exam. So you have anatomy exam in the end of the semester, for example, that you have the deadline that you can do that exam. If you don't do the exam or if you are not approved, you need to redo this subject. You will not pass to the next semester or to the next year. Here in Brazil, we don't do the exams, we just do the majors. You do an exam if you are not approved in the major. So it's the biggest difference I can tell you right now.
I believe from what you've spoken that the greatest difference between what you call majors and tests are the subjects covered. In Russia, apparently, in the end of the semester, you have a specific test that covers all the subjects that has been taught throughout the entire semester. Whereas here in Brazil, for example, if you have like 3 tests or call them whatever we want, but if you have like 3 tests, each test will just cover the subject that has been taught from the last test until that test date. So I believe most likely this is the major difference between tests here in Brazil and in Russia, I'd say. Is it, I think I've already asked this, but does it also last 6 years in Russia, medical school?
Yes, 6 years also, like here in Brazil, 6 years.
And once you've graduated from medical school, are you a fully functioning physician like here, for example, in Brazil, where you've graduated medical school and now you are, to all purposes and effects, a medical doctor? Or is it, for example, like the United States, where you have to take a test to prove your proficiency, for example, before being accredited as a physician?
When you graduate in Russia, as a medical doctor, you can study there, you can work there as a physician in Russia if they like you. And yeah, and you can work in Europe, in any places you choose, but you have just to do a proficient test. Like if you wanna work as a physician in France, so you have to do a French test before.
But it's not the same as if, for example, a Brazilian physician wanted to work in France. It's an abridged
Yes.
version, it's easier.
Yeah, no, it's not the same because when you graduate in Russia, in that part of Russia specifically, because Kursk is in the European part of Russia, it's not the Asian part of Russia. So in the European part of Russia, you have a European degree, so you can work in any place of Europe, but you have just to do a proficient test about the language. So it's not the same that me, Brazilian, I have a Brazilian degree of medical doctor and I want to work in France. No, it's not the same because I will need to do a revalidation. But there, you don't need to do a revalidation, just a proficient test.
Does that have something to do with the fact you went to university in English, or would it be exactly the same if you had gone to it in Russian? Are you aware of that? Do you know the answer to that?
If it's gonna be the same to study in English or in Russian.
For example, if you go to university, you went to university in English. Had you completed your university in English in Russia, you could have gone, for example, to France. True, some kind of accreditation program. If you had gone to the same university, Kursk Medical School, in Russia, attended the class in Russian language, could you as easily go to France, for example? Is it the same?
No, I don't think it is the same.
Because
Uh,
go on, go on. No, I was just going to say that I believe one of the most important things to consider when you go to study medicine abroad, and abroad is a very broad term because who is to say what is abroad? Hypothetically, you could have citizenship of many countries, for example. So, which of them is actually abroad? If you have an European citizenship, you are European, for example. So, if you are French, you go to study in Germany, is that really studying abroad? That's an interesting question, but that was not my original point. My original point is that many people from many different countries go to study medicine in Eastern Europe, for example. Not only in Russia, but also they use it to go to study in Ukraine. Let's see how things will go in the future, but also in Georgia, I think perhaps Armenia, and perhaps many of these people actually want to immigrate to other countries, but I'm not sure whether every Indian or Pakistani, for example, going to Georgia actually wants to live in Georgia and have a family in Georgia. And I'm not sure whether that's a good idea or a bad idea. But one of the things that must be considered is my diploma, is my MD title going to be considered, going to be accredited where I came from, for example, or in other countries? So if I go to university in Russia,
so, you're saying that if I came back to, for example, I'm Brazilian, and when I came back to Brazil, so no, when I came back to Brazil, if I had that European degree, so I will need to do a revalidation for my country to work here as a physician. So, like my friends, I have friends who finished their medical school there in Cusco State Medical University, and then they did a revalidation here, and now they are working as a physician here
in Brazil.
in Brazil.
If I might slightly derail the discussion, you've mentioned already to me that you have in your mind to take the United States Medical Licensing Examination, the USMLE, that is, to go to the United States. Did you already have that in mind when you went to Russia, or did you start considering it back in Brazil?
Yes, I already had it on my mind when I went to study in Russia. That was my plan to finish there and then do my medical revalidation for United States because it was kind of common there in that university.
Of all the students on Kursk Medical School, I don't think you are aware of all the students in Russia, but you can speak for our own university. What would you say were the outcomes, so to speak? What percentage of people actually stayed in Russia, went back to their countries, or, for example, went to Western Europe or to the United States? Or what would you say, for example, like 30% stayed in Russia, 30% went back to Iraq or to Morocco or whatever?
So, my opinion is that most of them come back for their natural countries. They study there, but they come back and then they do revalidation.
And I believe you must have talked to many foreigners from many countries, many different countries in the world. Would you say that the primary reason for studying in Russia is cost? Is there another reason why people actually go there? Do people actually go because they want to study in English, for example, or anything like that?
exactly also, but I think that is because that university is kind of open for um, many students from many countries. So it's common there to have people from Thailand, from Nigeria, from Greece, from um, there was also people from Brazil, people from South Africa, so from North Africa, from um, it was common to be many students there from different countries because the university it's they receive us. So and also the university has English medical school, not only Russian. The other universities they have only Russian. And
That's
also because of the sorry, also because of the price for living there, because this city it's kind of small, uh, and the price to living there, the apartment bills and everything, it's kind of cheaper than, for example, if you live in Moscow they have expensive lifestyles. So in Kursk it's not that way.
Yes, European cities are sometimes misleading when you try to look at them. For example, I saw some of the pictures you sent, some of the pictures you have on your Instagram, and we have this from the Medical Institute of Kursk, and it has that very Russian aesthetic. I think this is imperial. I'm not a great no, I'm not a specialist in Russian architecture, but this doesn't look like Soviet architecture to me. This looks like more like something imperial, and it's quite imposing. It looks something from some grand old place. How many inhabitants would say the city had? Kursk. How many people does Kursk have?
Mm. In my opinion, Kursk is a very, very, very big city. They say, Russians say that Kursk is a small city, but for me, it's kind of a very, very, very big city because they have shoppings and shopping malls, uh, seriously, one beside other. There is a shopping mall beside other big shopping mall. they they have the education there from people, like the people are very polite. If you lost money, they take it and give you back. If you forget your cell phone somewhere, they take you and give you back. They take that and give you back your cell phone. So it's not like here in my city in Brazil. And um, I think that there was a lot of people living there. For me, it's a very, very, very big city. Like I could get lost. I could get lost there.
Kursk
And I
has
live 2 years there.
Kursk has about half a million people. 480,000, I think. I just love the internet. Some 10, 15 years ago, we would have been like, how many people does Kursk have? Do you have an idea? Just Google it. Or ask ChatGPT, perhaps. But it has half a million people.
And Kursk is a very beautiful city. It's a historic city. They have that so many people they can tell you about Russian wars, and I had the opportunity to talk with that elderly people. So they stopped me on the on the road and they say, "Oh, I have my son. My son was in the war. Look, there is this cloth that he used." And it's a very historic city. They have that. that place where they do uh, where they write the names from the people that were in the war.
Some kind of memorial.
Yeah, memorial. Yeah, and it's very beautiful.
And did these elderly people talk to you in English? Did they speak English?
No,
In Russian?
they don't speak English because, like I said, for them, Kursk it's a very small city, so it's kind of the interior of the state. So they don't speak English. It's not like Moscow. Moscow, if you arrive there now, everyone will speak English with you. If you speak English with them, they will respond to you. They will answer you. But in Kursk, no. If you speak English, they will just look at you with an angry face and say, "Nada учить по-русски." It means you need to study Russian.
And overall, you spent 2 years in Russia, is that right?
Yeah, 2 years.
And then you came back to Brazil and is now almost completing your medical education in a Brazilian university. Would you like to say the name of your current university?
Uh, I can't say the name of my current university, but it is a university in the small city here in my state, Rio de Janeiro, and it's a very good university.
Okay, and what was the greatest difference you felt when you came back from Russia? Did you, so to speak, lose contact with any Brazilian touches, with any Brazilian characteristics, or was there anything you found strange when you actually came back?
When I arrived here from Russia, actually everyone would like to know how was the trip in Russia, and they said that my speak was kind of confusely.
You had like a Russian accent.
Yeah, because when I was in Russia, I had to speak English almost 24 hours per day because I was studying in English and my friends were Thailand and Sri Lanka people. My classmates were Sri Lanka and Thailand girls. So I didn't have too much Brazilian friends. More Thailand and Sri Lanka girls. So and also my Russian teacher, she said that I had an ability to speak Russian, so they asked me to sing in Russian. So I had to sing in the university concerts in Russia.
Is that what you see in some of the pictures? Let me see if I can get it. I think there's at least one, here, one of the pictures. Yes, you are holding a microphone, for example. Looks like you are singing, definitely.
Yeah. I sang sometimes for university in some competitions, and I won like third and second place. And so I had some privileges on university because of that. It was very good.
Was that like a choir or more like solo singing? You mentioned that.
I did both. I did both. I did sing in solo, but I also collaborate with a choir, a Russian choir, actually.
I have half a mind to ask you to sing a piece of a Russian music here. Of course, I know you haven't prepared, but
Yeah, it was actually a song from a Russian poet. His name was Pushkinsky, so it was a song from then. It was a poem that they transformed in a song. It's kind of I don't know if I remember, but it was kind of что виними тебя моем, она урод, как шум печали, вони без лучше передальни, как звук ночной весью глухом. Оно нас листке, оставит мертвый след подобный, узору написи надгробный, на непонятном языке. It's something like that. So it was a poem from Pushkinsky. They love Pushkinsky. He was a Russian poet. So they have also a shopping mall with his name, Pushkinsky.
Что в нем забито и давно, в волнениях новых и мятежных, твоей душе не даст оно воспоминаний чистых, нежных. Но ведь печаль в этой жене, произнеси его, тоскуя, скажи, есть планет обо мне, есть в мире сердце, где живу я. Она умрет, как шум печальный, волны блеснувшие берегами, как звук ночной в лесу глухом. Оно на память песке, оставим мертвый след подобный, узору написи надгробный на непонятном языке.
well, just turned out an interesting way. I believe anyone who came here to watch my first podcast didn't expect Russian singing. If we keep like this, we are going in the right direction. We are having very novel and unexpected things. Thank you for your singing.
You're welcome. Not at all.
And so now you are pretty much almost finishing your medical education. What would you say about the differences in practice and procedures and the more technical aspects in medicine between Brazil and Russia? We know that I believe this is perhaps universal almost anywhere in the world. One of the greatest challenges medical students have, is to actually get the chance to do and learn procedures. For example, a central venous line or intubating a patient, for example. Many people here in Brazil, and I believe in many places around the world, finish their university without having completed at least one of the major medical procedures, for example. How does it work in Russia? Is it somehow different from Brazil? Do you have greater or harder access to performing procedures and practicing these practical aspects of medicine?
So, it was kind of it's very difficult because we are foreigners, and we don't have too much opportunities like the Russians. So it's different from Brazil. Here in Brazil, we have more opportunities talking about the practice, the medical practice. So there in Russia, the foreigners, they don't have too much opportunities. But also, I just studied there from 2 years, so I was in the beginning also in the medical journey. So maybe the other students, maybe they had more opportunities for medical practice.
There's a valid point there. Did any of the patients speak English? How did you communicate with the patients? To collect history, for example.
The patients, they do not speak English, so you had to speak Russian. It was the only way. So that's why we had Russian classes. Actually, my Russian teacher, it was the only one who could speak Portuguese. But the classes were in English, so we learned Russian in English. But also my teacher, my Russian teacher, she spoke Brazilian Portuguese. Yeah.
Brazilian Portuguese.
Yeah, she spoke. Mm-hmm. And also I teach her. I taught her some phrasal verbs in Portuguese. Yeah, and in the final classes, she asked me to stay with her to do particular Russian classes because of my singing. So she kind of did a trainee with me. And also we had Latin classes. Latin classes. It's different here from Brazil. We don't have Latin classes in medical school.
Yes, we of course use some terms. That's when I also studied for the USMLE, even though I never took the actual test. But that's one of the things that surprised me about studying medicine in English. The fact that because Portuguese is a Latin language, we translate many of the Latin terms, whereas English, not being from the same family, takes the terms exactly as they are in Latin. So, with to some irony, I would say, we have the actual terms in Latin employed in English. So, I actually learned a lot of Latin studying English. I believe a non-medical example, an obvious example, for example, would be millennium, millennia, the plural that's made in Latin and is preserved in English. And we also carry this on to medical terms, such as, for example, one atrium, both atria, one bronchus, both bronchi. And it's quite interesting. So I believe perhaps Russian also has this habit of not translating Latin terms that could perhaps explain it. Did you ever consider staying in Russia kind of permanently?
No, no, no. I did not consider that. Uh, because actually I am a patriot. So I love my country, and Russia it's a good country, but for me there is no one like Brazilians. We have a special, it's like we have something special in us, and when you are Brazilian and you go to Russia, you miss that uh, you miss the Brazilians. You miss the Brazilian way to hug, to um, to be polite and to laugh. They are kind of serious people.
Am I right then to believe that after you finish residency, for example, in the United States, you are coming back? Or we will
Yeah.
just stay in some Brazilian heavy American city like Miami or Boston, for example?
So my plan is to go there and to learn most of uh, to learn everything I can to bring to my country and make my country better. So I plan to specialize in global surgery and to bring better conditions, better surgeon conditions to places like my city that and places and remote places in Brazil like Amazon and some places like that when people die from appendix when people don't have an
Appendicitis.
anatomy. Yeah, they die from appendicitis. They don't have and they don't know how to do an appendectomy or something like that. So I plan to specialize in global surgery and to help remote places in my country.
Well, my next question was already going to be which residency you plan to attend. So that pretty much also answers it. And since we are on the subject of medical education, residency, and what you're going to learn and what you're going to employ, I believe it's quite obvious I'm somewhat passionate about medical education. After all, I have a medical education channel, but so do you. You have the Paulinha Estuda, which is in Portuguese, so perhaps if you are watching this podcast, don't speak Portuguese, or perhaps you do, or perhaps Paula will start an English spoken channel or page, who knows? In any case, I will just post any links to her social medias below. Because I could even ask you, I can ask you to tell them, the problem is that they change. My handle, for example, on Instagram or YouTube has changed already. So I'm not sure whether in a couple of years you'll just call it Study with Paula, for example. So, you teach mostly pharmacology. Would you like to talk about how it started and what was your preliminary goal with starting this teaching experience?
Yes, I was a student that I have some difficulties in understanding some subjects, and it started actually in Russia. So when I was a medical student in Russia, I realized that I had some difficulties understanding, and then I had some people, Nigerian people or Thailand friends, who taught me through this method of teaching. So I realized that it worked for me. So my goal is to help some other Paulas or some other people who also has the same difficult. So my plan is to help them, teaching them what I know, what I can. So also my goal is to be a mentor, a good mentor to form another excellent doctors for the world. So I decided to start right now, and so I can try to be a better mentor and to be a better professor in the future. So I decided just start now, and my goal is to help another students who has the same difficulties I had.
Yes, I believe time, how do they say the saying? Time in the market beats timing the market. This is usually used for stock investing, but it can also be applied to YouTube and Instagram. The more videos you make, the better you become, the more famous you become, you need some time to grow. So you said, starting now, absolutely, even if you transition it, for example, to surgical teaching once you are in the United States, I've had my channel for like 3 years, and I think this is universal regardless of the specialty or the topic of your channel. If you look at your very first videos, you will find them terrible, hideous. And to some degree, this is a great point because it means you are improving. So I totally agree with this approach. I'm certain that a couple years from now I will find this video quite bad. And I hope so, because it means it has improved a lot. Okay, so now we've covered the less important questions. Let's move to the really important stuff. After all, this is a very serious podcast. Was it very cold in Russia?
My God, it was so cold, and like my nose bleed and hands and mouth. So it was very cold there. I had to. You have to wear so many clothes to just go to the supermarket. Yeah.
What was the coldest temperature you experienced there?
Uh, in Kursk, I experienced minus 26, something around there.
Celsius.
Yeah, but in Moscow, I experienced minus 40.
Interesting, I didn't expect Moscow to be colder than Kursk, but then again, what do I know about Russian geography or climate?
Yeah, Moscow is colder.
Did you travel in Russia? You mentioned Moscow, but I believe Moscow must have been your plane final destination, perhaps. Did you go also to other cities?
I didn't travel a lot. I just went to Amsterdam, I think, and yeah, it was just Amsterdam. I couldn't not I couldn't travel a lot because of my financial problems. That's why I went to Russia because I couldn't afford to pay medical school in Brazil. So when I arrived there, I could not travel a lot like my friends. But I had friends who travel, who went to France, who went to England, London, um, a lot of that places. I went just to Amsterdam.
I think perhaps in this sense, Russia is actually closer to Brazil. What I mean by this is, here in Brazil, we often don't have a lot of experience traveling abroad, because our country is a large country. You mentioned, for example, Amsterdam. If you live in the Netherlands, you can just drive to the next door country in like 1 hour, 1.5 hours, you're in the next country. I have friends who studied medicine in Europe, in Western Europe, and mostly through exchange programs. There are many like this from IFMSA, I think. But it's very ordinary for them. It's something very common to just take a train, for example, and go to the next city, which is, I believe, also an explanation of why people in Western Europe speak so many languages. They have a lot of contact. I'm not sure if people in Russia speak a lot of languages, just as people in Brazil don't.
Yeah. Uh, Maybe in Moscow, maybe, because Moscow it's a more development city. But in Koski, no. But they have a different lifestyle from us Brazilians. For example, they prefer to travel abroad than to buy a car, for example.
That's interesting because the argument I was going to make is exactly that because it's a very large country, the largest in the world, in fact, just like Brazil is a very large country, it's far to travel to other countries. You can't just walk over the border. So you tend to travel a lot more domestically. And you've just shattered my previous expectations. So Russians do travel a lot abroad. That's an interesting fact.
Yeah, they prefer to travel more It's very different culture here from Brazil. Like it's common for you to go there and to see daddies walking with their children and families walking and in the parks around there. Uh, they don't have the cars are not like here in my city, for example. Here we have uh, we have expensive cars and something like that. uh, you will not see this kind of things there in Koski. You will see they like to live a different lifestyle. Like they prefer to have quality time than to buy material things.
Which is something I wouldn't argue against. But then again, we are talking about a cultural level, not a personal level. So, to bring our closing remarks, so to speak, to look at a few pictures I saw on your Instagram you sent me. We have this first, I believe this is Kursk Medical Institute. It's in the subtitle, so yes, I believe so. Here we have some letters from the Cyrillic alphabet, for example. What's written here? Okay, I get it. It must be KSMU in Cyrillic alphabet for Kursk State Medical University. Okay, makes a lot of sense. For whatever reason, the letters from the Cyrillic alphabet look like other languages from the Latin alphabet. I have no idea why this is so, but like their R looks like a T or their S looks like a R, something like that. Their H looks like an M for us. We have snow, undoubtedly. Here you are in university. Apparently they have the same habit we do of using the university logo on their left arm. Is that right?
Yeah. It's but actually they it's more a Brazilian thing. It's kind of the agents in São Paulo, they asked us to do it, but the university don't ask anything about the white lab coat.
You mentioned the agency again. I'd like to go back to that. Did they offer options between universities, or is that agents exclusively associated with Kursk Medical School? Did they have another university if you wanted to, for example?
Uh, it no, they didn't offer another options for us in that time in 2015. I don't know about right now, but it was just for Kursk State Medical University. But I have some friends who migrate for Moscow and another universities for Ukraine or for the Asian part of Russia. So I have some friends who did that.
You also built an Olaf, of course. I believe this must have been some Thailand, Brazil, and Nigeria. It's interesting to see how people go from very different countries. They come from very far away to go to university. I must admit, I had no idea before I started the Instagram page that people actually travel to a different continent to study medicine. And I'm not sure what's your personal opinion on it, but I quite like this idea of teaching in English, for example, of opening your university to foreign medical students. Because to some degree, medicine is somewhat universal. And I think it's quite interesting to have this teaching English you could argue against law, for example, being different. Common law is different from Roman law, but there are pretty much not that many ways of performing an appendicitis, for example, depending on your country. So I strongly believe we could have a much more universal teaching of medicine. And by that, what I mean is that countries' educations could converge a lot more. I believe that going to a different country is a very valid way to learn medicine. Would you subscribe to that idea based on the experience you've had? Do you believe there are challenges I have not foreseen or mentioned?
Yes, I believe that there was some some difference around the medical practice. A lot actually. For example, uh, it's nothing actually, but it's different when you are Brazilian. You know that in the surgery rooms here in Brazil we have the air conditioner and it's very 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 cold, but in Russia we don't have it. So especially I don't know in Moscow, the Moscow hospitals, but in Kursk we don't have that air conditioner. And it was kind of hot there when you put that clothes, that surgeon clothes, and it's different. The asepsy when you do it, the scrub, it's different also. You have to put your hand in some kind of liquid that will clean your hands. It's different here from Brazil. You have the scrub, the way you wash your hands. We have a method to do that, and there in Kursk was kind of different.
Even though a lot of people don't actually follow the methods that closely, but let's skip that part. And so, just to close it, I see that here on the last pictures you have, I believe this must have been your close 10 people group. You mentioned there were like 30 groups of 10 people each. I believe this must have been your practical classes group, is that it?
Yeah, the practical class group. They were Sri Lanka and from Thailand.
And there's also a picture where there is someone standing in front of a Brazil writing on the wall. This could be a projection, for example. What was that? What's the context behind that picture?
You say the picture that was wrote Brazil behind me?
Indeed, with yellow and purple being the major colors. There are some flowers behind.
Oh yeah. It was a contest from all of the universities, all of the medical universities from the state. So I had to sing a song representing Brazil, and I won the second place, second or third, I don't remember, second place. And so I represent the university and the Brazilians. So I was singing.
Interesting. You had mentioned you sang for your Russian university, but I didn't know you actually, how could I put it, identified as a Brazilian when competing. I'm not sure that would be the most correct term. And just so I don't mispronounce it again, how do you correctly pronounce Kursk? Is it Kursk, Kursk, Kursk? What's the exact pronunciation?
It's Kursk.
Kursk.
Yeah,
Okay.
Kursk.
Well, do you have any closing remarks before we finish it?
No. It's just that maybe if you plan to study medicine to go to medical school, I think it's a good place for you to go. And just just follow your dreams, because if it's your dream to do a medical doctor, to be a medical doctor, and if you can go, so I think it's a good place to go to study. And uh, the I know the professors, they ask a lot from us, but I do have many good experience that, and I do have many friends that I did there, that I made there, and I I can conversate, I can talk with them until now. Actually, my best friend is from there. It's from Russia. It's a Brazilian girl that I met there, and she is my best friend. She also came for my wedding here in Brazil. So, whenever is your chance to achieve your dreams, just go for it. Don't lose it.
And by the way, no one's mentioning here we should go to Russia right now. That's not what we mean. Once everything has been sorted out. Not to go into any more specific details. But
No, yeah, I don't think they are taking anyone to go to study there.
But thank you for coming. Thank you for accepting my invitation. If you want to mention your Instagram handle, for example, I will also put them down here. But if you want to also say them out loud, go ahead. Feel free to do it. But thank you for coming. It was a pleasure having you. And until the next time, I want to make your closing remarks.
Thank you. So goodbye for everyone. And if you have interest in learning some pharmacology or physiology, even you are not Brazilian, just follow me. Maybe I will do an adventure myself in some English teachers. So
Well,
thank you.
thank you everyone for watching, and I hope to see you on episode 2. Thank you for watching.